My mother-in-law humiliated my poor family at my wedding, then she needed the woman she looked down on. At my wedding, my mother-in-law made sure everyone knew she thought her son had married beneath him. After months of insults, even my husband began treating me like an embarrassment. I stopped asking them to respect me and quietly rebuilt the career I had given up. A year later, when the family image they valued more than anything began to crack, the person they turned to was the one they had spent so long dismissing. On my wedding day, my mother-in-law did not look at me when I walked into the reception room. She looked past me, toward the tables, the flowers, the rented linens, and the relatives she wanted to impress. Then she smiled the way people smile when they are about to say something cruel and want everyone to mistake it for a joke. "Well," Margaret Caldwell said, lifting her champagne glass, "I suppose every family has to make sacrifices. Ours just happens to be paying for the privilege of bringing in a daughter-in-law with no money." A few people laughed because they were uncomfortable. A few laughed because they thought she was funny. My father stared at his plate. My mother's hand froze around her water glass. I stood 3 feet away in a dress I had bought on sale and altered myself, holding the hand of Margaret's son, Jason, the man I had loved for 4 years. I waited for him to say something. He cleared his throat. "Mom, come on. It's our wedding." Margaret tilted her head. "What?" "I'm teasing. Claire knows I adore her." She still did not look at me. I knew then that she did not adore me. What I did not yet understand was how expensive it would become to keep pretending that she did. My parents had driven 3 hours from a small town south of Macon for the wedding. They had spent most of their lives working land that had never produced enough to make anyone rich. My father grew peaches for a local cooperative and repaired farm equipment whenever the season was slow. My mother cleaned rooms at a motel near the interstate and kept the books for a church daycare 2 afternoons a week. They had never owned a new car. They had never taken a real vacation. When I was accepted into the University of Georgia, they celebrated for one night and spent the next 4 years figuring out how to keep me there. I had scholarships, loans, campus jobs, and 100 tiny sources of income that never seemed large enough by themselves. My parents filled the gaps. $50 one month. $200 the next. A grocery card tucked into a birthday envelope. Gas money hidden in the cup holder after they visited. The night before my wedding, my father asked me to step outside the small hotel where they were staying. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. "Dad, no." "Yes. You can't afford this." He shrugged, but his eyes were already wet. "We saved it. Your mother and I wanted you to have something that's yours. Put it away. Use it if you ever need to stand on your own 2 feet." I laughed softly because I thought he was being dramatic. "I'm getting married, not escaping from prison." He did not laugh with me. "Just keep it," he said. For years afterward, I remembered the way he said those 3 words. Margaret came from a different world, or at least she believed she did. The Caldwells were not old money Atlanta society, although Margaret spoke as if a museum wing might someday be named after them. Her late husband had built a successful commercial flooring company. They bought a large brick house in a gated subdivision in Marietta, joined a country club, and learned how to turn every family gathering into a small demonstration of status. Jason had grown up with private tennis lessons, summer camps, and a mother who measured people by where they lived, what they drove, and whether their clothes looked expensive without displaying a price tag. When Jason and I met in college, he seemed embarrassed by that part of his upbringing. He told me he hated the way his mother treated restaurant servers. He rolled his eyes when she asked what my parents did for a living. He said he wanted a simpler life. I believed him. For a while, he even seemed to believe himself. We had our daughter, Lily, 2 years before the wedding. She was not planned, but she was wanted. I was working as a junior graphic designer at a small studio in Athens, And Jason had just taken a sales position with a technology services company in Atlanta. We moved in together, then moved closer to his mother after Lily was born because Margaret offered help with childcare. That help came with conditions I did not recognize at first. Margaret bought Lily clothes and then complained when I dressed her in anything else. She offered to watch her and then told Jason I was always running around if I used the time to meet a friend or take a freelance job. When Jason's schedule became more demanding, Margaret began suggesting that my salary barely covered daycare anyway. "A child needs her mother," she said one afternoon while folding a tiny pink sweater she had purchased without asking. "Jason is doing well. Why exhaust yourself for some little design job?" I had been exhausted. Lily was waking at night. My commute was almost an hour each way. My manager had started assigning late revisions to people without children because he assumed parents would refuse, which meant I was losing opportunities to work on larger accounts. Jason told me quitting could be temporary. "Just until Lily starts preschool," he said. "You can always go back." I wanted to believe that too. So I left my job. For the first 6 months, I was grateful. I saw every new word Lily learned. I took her to story time at the library and watched her make friends at the playground. I cooked dinner most nights and turned our small townhouse into a home. Then Margaret's help became supervision. If she arrived and the breakfast dishes were still in the sink, she noticed. If Lily had a runny nose, she asked whether I had taken her out too much. If I wore leggings, she asked whether I had given up. If I bought a new blouse, she wanted to know why Jason's money was being wasted on clothes when I was at home all day. The strangest part was that none of the comments sounded catastrophic by themselves. That was how they accumulated. One drop at a time. After the wedding, the drops became a steady leak. Margaret seemed to interpret marriage as permission to stop pretending. The first Sunday after our honeymoon, she came for dinner. I made roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, and a lemon cake. She took one bite of the chicken and reached for salt. "You know, Jason has always liked more seasoning." Jason looked at me and gave a small apologetic smile. The next week she criticized the curtains. The week after that, she asked why my purse was peeling at the edges. At Christmas she gave me a designer wallet in front of everyone and said, "I thought you needed at least one nice thing." I laughed with the room because I had not yet learned that laughing at your own humiliation does not make it hurt less. The incident that stayed with me happened in March. I was driving to my parents' house with Lily for the weekend. Margaret had hosted a dinner the night before and packed a large plastic container for me as I was leaving. "Take this to your mother," she said. "No sense letting perfectly good food go to waste." I looked through the clear lid. Half-eaten rolls. Dry slices of chicken. A scoop of mashed potatoes that had been scraped from a serving dish. Food that had already sat on her table for hours. "We don't need this," I said. "Don't be silly. I'm sure they'll appreciate it." There was no kindness in her voice. She wanted me to understand that leftovers were appropriate for people like my parents. I set the container back on the counter. Margaret's eyebrows lifted. "Claire? My parents can feed themselves." Jason was standing near the garage door checking his phone. He looked up at the tension. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Margaret said. I was trying to be generous. I waited for him to ask what she meant. Instead he sighed. "Claire, just take it. Why make everything a thing?" That sentence followed me all the way to my parents' house. Why make everything a thing? Because apparently the peace of the family depended on my willingness to swallow every insult before anyone else had to taste it. My mother knew something was wrong the moment I walked into her kitchen. "You look tired." Lily was up early. "That's not the kind of tired I mean." I changed the subject. My parents never said they disliked Jason. They asked careful questions instead. Was he helping with Lily? Was I sleeping enough? Did I still draw? Did I ever think about going back to work? That last question irritated me more than it should have. I will when the time is right, I said. My father nodded. All right. He never told me what to do. That made it harder to ignore what I already knew. The final break did not come from Margaret. It came from Jason. One Friday in April, he stood in our bedroom fastening a watch while I sat on the floor helping Lily put shoes on the wrong feet. He had mentioned a dinner with people from work, and I assumed we were all going to Margaret's first so she could watch Lily. What time should I be ready? I asked. Jason glanced at me through the mirror. For what? Dinner. He hesitated just long enough to make my stomach tighten. I thought I'd go by myself. You said spouses were coming. Some are. I stood up. So why aren't I? Lily looked between us, sensing the change in my voice. Jason lowered his hands. Claire, don't turn this into a fight. I'm asking a question. He exhaled. It's mostly people from leadership. They're talking business. You won't know anyone. I've been to company dinners before. That was different. How? He looked away. I had spent months excusing his silences. That night I made him fill one. How is it different, Jason? He rubbed his thumb against the face of his watch. You don't really fit with that crowd. The room became so quiet that I could hear Lily's Velcro strap ripping open as she took off the shoe I had just put on her. I don't fit. That's not what I mean. Then say what you mean. His jaw tightened. He was irritated now, which almost made it easier. They talk about clients, investments, travel. You don't have much to add lately. And Mom says sometimes you come across like you're uncomfortable. I don't want you feeling awkward, and I don't want to spend the whole night worrying that. He stopped. That what? That somebody's judging us. I stared at him. Us? He closed his eyes for a second. You know what I mean. I did. He meant me. He was embarrassed by me. Not by the woman I had been in college when he borrowed my laptop because his was broken. Not by the designer who had stayed up all night helping him make a pitch deck for his first real interview. Not by the woman who had given birth to his child and left a job because he told her the family needed it. He was embarrassed by the version of me that had formed around the life he asked me to live. I looked down at Lily. She was watching me with wide brown eyes. That stopped me from saying everything that rose into my throat. Go to dinner, I said. Jason blinked. Claire. Go. You're going to be late. He left 20 minutes later. I gave Lily a bath, read the same picture book 3 times, and tucked her into bed. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop closed in front of me. For almost an hour, I did nothing. I did not cry. I did not text Jason. I did not call my mother. I replayed the wedding toast. The leftover container. The wallet. The comments about my clothes. The way Jason had gradually stopped defending me and started translating Margaret's contempt into practical advice. Dress differently. Talk less. Don't take it personally. Don't make everything a thing. I realized I had been waiting for them to grant me dignity, as if respect were something they owned and I needed permission to receive. That night I opened the laptop. My old design software was 2 versions out of date. My portfolio site had expired. Half the links in my professional bookmarks were dead. I felt something close to panic. Then I remembered my father's envelope. I had never spent the money. It sat in a savings account with the few $1,000s I had kept from my old job. At 1 a.m, I made a list. Update software. Rebuild portfolio. Find childcare. Contact former clients. Take an online course on current packaging workflows. Learn the motion tools I had ignored before Lily was born. Apply for freelance work. Apply for jobs when I had enough recent work to show. At the top of the page I wrote one sentence. I will not ask anyone in this house for permission to become myself again. The next Monday, I toured a community childcare center 10 minutes from our townhouse. It was not fancy. The playground equipment had faded paint, and the director kept a handwritten sign-in sheet on a clipboard near the door. But the rooms were clean, the teachers were warm, and Lily spent the entire visit stacking wooden blocks with another little girl. 3 mornings a week cost more than I wanted to spend, but I could cover the first 2 months from my savings. When I told Jason, he stared at me across the kitchen island. Childcare? Why? I'm going back to work. You already work. You're with Lily. You know what I mean. He looked uneasy. Did something happen? I almost laughed. I'm a graphic designer, Jason. I haven't stopped being one because I stayed home. I need time to rebuild my portfolio. Okay, but we should talk about the budget. I'm paying for it. That surprised him. With what? My savings. He leaned back slightly, as if the existence of money that belonged to me had not occurred to him. You don't have to prove anything because of what I said Friday. I'm not. That was true in a way he could not understand yet. I had spent too long trying to prove things to him and his mother. My new plan had nothing to do with winning an argument. I wanted choices. Margaret found out within a week. She came over on a Tuesday morning and noticed Lily's backpack by the door. Where are you two going? Lily has childcare. I have work to do. Work? She said it as if I had announced that I was joining a circus. Design work. Margaret gave a small laugh. Claire, honey, there are thousands of 22-year-olds doing that for pennies online. You have a child and a husband. You don't need to chase every little idea that makes you feel independent. I zipped Lily's jacket. Good to know. I'm serious. Jason works hard. He needs a peaceful home, not a wife glued to a computer at midnight. I looked up. Then it's fortunate he knows how to load a dishwasher. Her smile vanished. I smiled at Lily. Ready, sweetheart? We left. The first month was humiliating in a completely different way. My hands remembered more than my confidence did, but the industry had moved. Tools had changed. Clients expected faster revisions, cleaner files, social media variations, motion mockups, and presentation decks that looked finished before anyone approved the concept. I took a course after Lily went to bed. I watched tutorials with headphones while folding laundry. I rebuilt old projects from scratch to practice new software. I emailed people I had not spoken to in 3 years and tried not to sound desperate. Some never replied. One former client wrote back to tell me they had moved everything in-house. A former coworker, Elena Ruiz, called me instead of emailing. You disappeared, she said. I had a baby. Then I got married. Then I apparently became invisible. There was a pause. That sounds like a story. Not one I want to tell yet. Fair. What do you need? I swallowed. Asking was harder than I expected. Work. Even small stuff. I need recent pieces. Elena had moved to a boutique agency in Midtown. She could not hire me, but she sent me a restaurant menu redesign and a set of social ads for a fitness studio. The pay was modest. I treated both jobs like national campaigns. I delivered early. I organized the files perfectly. I provided an extra size the client had forgotten to request. The restaurant owner referred me to a friend who owned a bakery. The bakery owner needed labels. The labels became a small packaging system. The packaging system went into my new portfolio. At first, I worked at the dining table. Then Jason complained that my equipment was taking over the house, so I bought a used desk and put it in the corner of our bedroom. He did not understand why I kept going after jobs that paid a few $100s. "You're spending almost that much on childcare," he said one night. "For now. It doesn't make sense." "Not yet." He shook his head and went downstairs. I learned to stop explaining seeds to people who only respected trees. By the second month, I had a routine. I woke at 6, made breakfast, packed Lily's snack, and took her to childcare 3 mornings a week. I worked from 8:30 until 1. Then I picked her up, gave her lunch, and did mothering until bedtime. On the nights I had deadlines, I reopened the laptop at 9 and worked until midnight or later. Some nights I stared at a screen until the letters blurred. Some mornings I wanted to cancel childcare, shut the laptop, and accept the version of my life everyone else found convenient. Then something small would happen. A client would write, "This is exactly what I was trying to say." Elena would text, "Nice work. Sending your name to someone." Lily would climb into my lap, point at my screen, and say, "Mommy made that." Those moments were enough. 3 months after the night Jason went to dinner without me, Elena called at 4 in the afternoon. "Do you still do packaging?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "No, but tell me what it is." She laughed. "That's more convincing." A regional food company called Harbor and Pine was preparing to expand a line of ready-to-cook meals into grocery stores across the Southeast. Their agency had lost a senior designer in the middle of the project. They needed freelance support immediately. The brief arrived at 5:30. The first review was Monday morning. It was Thursday. I read the email twice and felt the old fear rise. Not the fear of Margaret. Not the fear of Jason's judgment. The cleaner, sharper fear that comes when you have finally been offered the thing you asked for and now have to discover whether you can actually do it. I called the childcare center and asked whether Lily could stay full days Friday and Monday. Then I called my mother. "Can you come Saturday?" "What happened?" "Nothing bad. I got a project. A big one." Her voice changed immediately. "What do you need?" "For uninterrupted hours and someone to remind me to eat." "We'll be there by 9. My parents arrived with a cooler of food, a bag of toys for Lily, and no questions about how much the project paid. My father looked at the desk in the corner of my bedroom. "This your office?" "For now." He ran a hand over the cheap particle board surface. "Looks like an office to me." I worked for 11 hours that Saturday. Harbor and Pine's existing designs tried too hard to look wholesome. Hand-drawn leaves, script fonts, muted colors, generic farm imagery. The food was actually aimed at busy young families who wanted dinner to feel fresh without spending an hour cooking. I shifted the concept. Clearer typography. Strong photography. A small color system that made each flavor easy to identify from a freezer aisle. I built mock-ups that showed the package in a crowded store case, not floating against a beautiful empty background. At midnight Sunday, I sent the first presentation to Elena. At 7:12 Monday morning, she texted. "Call me when you wake up." I was already awake. "They love it," she said when I called. "Not like polite love. They want your direction." I sat on the edge of the bed and closed my eyes. "Okay. Claire, did you hear me?" "Yes." I'm trying not to scream because Lily is brushing her teeth. The project lasted 5 weeks. There were revisions, a photo shoot, a last-minute nutrition panel change, and one executive who suddenly decided the word hearty was essential to every package. I learned how to defend good ideas without acting precious about them. I learned where to compromise and where not to. When my final freelance payment came through, it was just over $4,000. I stared at the deposit notification for a long time. The amount mattered, but not because it made me rich. It did not. After childcare, software, and taxes, the number became smaller quickly. What mattered was that someone had paid me well for judgment, skill, and experience that had not disappeared just because Margaret refused to see them. That night I bought a bottle of grocery store champagne and put it in the refrigerator. Jason came home after 9. His company had entered a rough quarter, and he had been working later, talking more about sales targets and less about anything else. "What's that for?" he asked, nodding toward the bottle. "I finished the Harbor and Pine project." "Oh. Good." I waited. He opened the refrigerator again. "Did we have any of that pasta left?" My excitement dimmed, but it did not disappear. "Bottom shelf." He reheated dinner and ate standing at the counter. I poured one glass of champagne for myself. For years I had assumed celebrations required witnesses. That night I learned they did not. The Harbor and Pine work changed everything. It gave me a project strong enough to open doors. Elena sent my portfolio to a creative director named Naomi Brooks at a respected Atlanta advertising firm called Mercer Lane. Naomi asked me to come in for coffee. I nearly did not go. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of my closet and realized how thoroughly my world had shrunk. I owned clothes for school pickup, grocery runs, family dinners, and church with my parents. The one blazer I had kept from my old job was too tight in the shoulders. I thought about Margaret's designer wallet and hated that I was thinking about it. Then I reminded myself that presentation was not the same thing as worth. Clothing could be a tool without becoming a verdict. I spent $180 on navy pants, a cream blouse, and a structured jacket from a department store sale. It was more than I usually spent on myself in 6 months. I paid with my freelance account. When I walked into Mercer Lane, I felt underdressed for the first 30 seconds and then too busy to care. Naomi was in her 40s, calm, direct, and unimpressed by rehearsed answers. "Why did you leave design?" she asked. "I had a child, moved cities, and made a practical decision that lasted longer than I intended." "Why come back now?" I considered giving her a safe answer about creative passion. Instead I said, because I realized I had arranged my whole life around being useful to other people, and I was starting to disappear inside it. Design is one of the places where I know how to think clearly. I wanted that part of myself back. Naomi studied me for a moment. "Good answer." She turned my portfolio toward me and tapped the Harbor and Pine work. "This is strong." "Who led the strategy?" "The agency team." I pushed the shelf visibility concept and the family use case. "Who presented it?" "I did for the last 2 client reviews." "Were you nervous?" "Very." Naomi smiled. Also a good answer. Mercer Lane did not offer me a job that day. They called 2 weeks later. The position was senior designer, one level below where I hoped to be eventually, with a salary of $78,000, health insurance, a retirement match, and 2 work-from-home days a week. I read the offer 3 times in my car before I went inside. Jason was home early. I put the letter on the counter. He scanned it. 78? Plus bonus eligibility. He looked at me as if he were trying to connect the woman in front of him with the woman he had left at home during his company dinner. "That's really good." "Yes." "What about Lily?" "The childcare center has a full-time preschool program. My parents can help 1 Friday a month. Mercer Lane lets people work from home twice a week. We'll need to split pickup." The word split changed his expression. "My schedule is insane right now." "So is mine going to be." "Claire, I'm not saying you shouldn't take it." "Good. Because I already did." He stared at me. I expected anger. Instead, for one brief second, I saw uncertainty. The balance of our marriage had shifted, and neither of us knew what would happen next. Margaret reacted exactly as I expected. "Full-time," she said at Sunday dinner. "With Lily so young?" "She's 3. 3 is young." Jason's sister, Megan, looked down at her plate. She had learned long ago that disagreeing with Margaret only prolonged meals. Margaret continued. "And Jason's job is so demanding. I hope this isn't going to create chaos at home." I cut a piece of salmon. "We'll manage. I just don't understand why everything has to change because you got one good project." Jason opened his mouth. For the first time in months, he surprised me. "Mom, it's a real job. A good one. Leave it alone." Margaret's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I looked at him. He did not look back. It was not an apology. It was not even enough. But it was the first time in a long while that he had placed a boundary between his mother and me without being forced. I wished I could say the marriage improved immediately after that. It did not. 2 careers and a preschooler required logistics, and logistics exposed every old assumption we had avoided. On my first week at Mercer Lane, Jason forgot pickup on Wednesday. The childcare center called me at 5:38 while I was in a client review. I stepped into the hall. "She's fine," the director said, "but we're closing in 20 minutes. I called Jason. No answer. I called again. He texted, "In meeting." "What's up?" "You were supposed to get Lily." There was a long pause before the typing bubbles appeared. "I thought you were." I left work, drove across Atlanta traffic with my jaw clenched, and arrived 6 minutes before closing. That night Jason said, "I'm sorry," but followed it with, "I just have too much going on." I put Lily's backpack on the chair. "Then put reminders on your calendar. You know my days change constantly." "Mine do too." "Your office is 15 minutes closer." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" I looked at him. "The point is that my job is not the flexible one by default because I'm her mother." He rubbed both hands over his face. "Can we not do this tonight?" "No. We have to do it tonight, because tomorrow needs a plan." That was how I changed most that year. I stopped accepting postponement as a solution. At work, I grew faster than I expected. Naomi gave me accounts that required client contact, not just execution. I learned to walk into conference rooms without apologizing for being there. I learned that a strong idea could survive criticism if I did not treat criticism like rejection. I learned how many talented people carried private doubts into beautiful offices and simply worked anyway. One afternoon, Naomi closed my presentation deck and said, "You know what your problem is?" My stomach tightened. "What?" "You still present like you're expecting someone to tell you that you're lucky to be in the room." I blinked. She leaned back. "You're not lucky. You're prepared. Those are different things." I wrote that sentence on a sticky note and kept it inside my notebook. The changes outside work were quieter. I stopped buying clothes based on whether Margaret would approve of them. I did take a short professional styling workshop offered through a local women's career organization, not because I believed I needed to look expensive, but because I wanted to feel intentional again. I learned what cuts fit me, how to build a simple work wardrobe, and how to stop saving every nice thing for an occasion that never came. I started getting my hair cut regularly. I replaced the old purse with one I bought myself. I joined 2 women from work for coffee on Friday mornings. I made a separate business savings account for freelance income and began taking one carefully chosen side project each month. None of those choices transformed me into a different person. That was what Margaret failed to understand when she began looking at me differently. I was not becoming worthy. I was becoming visible, including to myself. By late summer, Jason's company was in trouble. At first he said it was a slow quarter. Then he said two major clients had delayed contracts. Then his department froze hiring. He started taking calls on the back porch after Lily went to bed. He drank more often, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. One bourbon became two. Two became a heavy pour he carried upstairs. His patience shortened. One Tuesday, Lily spilled milk at breakfast. Jason snapped, "Can somebody in this house pay attention for 5 minutes?" Lily's face crumpled. I took the towel from his hand. "Go get ready for work." "I can clean it." "I know." "Go anyway." He stared at me, then looked at Lily. His anger drained almost instantly. "Hey, pumpkin." "I'm sorry." Daddy's stressed. She would not look at him. That night, after she was asleep, I told him stress was not a free pass to make the house afraid of his mood. "I'm not making anyone afraid." "You scared her this morning." I apologized. "Good. Don't make her responsible for forgiving behavior you can control." He stared at me with an expression I recognized from our first year together, the look he used when he wanted to argue but suspected I was right. "You think I don't know I'm failing?" he asked quietly. The question changed the room. I sat across from him at the kitchen table. "I didn't say that." "You don't have to." He looked down at his hands. "Everything at work is falling apart. Half my team is interviewing somewhere else. I can't close anything. Mom keeps asking how the quarter is going because she's planning that ridiculous anniversary dinner like it's a shareholder meeting. And now you're doing great, which is good." "I know it's good. But I come home and..." He stopped. "And what?" "And I feel like you're moving forward and I'm standing still." There it was. Not the whole truth, but more truth than he had given me in months. "Do you know what I felt like when you told me not to come to that dinner?" He nodded once. "No," I said. "I don't think you do." I felt like I had spent years helping build a life that became evidence against me. "I stayed home because we decided it made sense." "Then you used the fact that I stayed home to decide I wasn't interesting enough to stand next to you." His face tightened. "I was an ass." "Yes." He almost smiled, but I did not. "And your mother's opinions did not appear in your mouth by accident," I continued. "You let them in because they were convenient." He looked toward the dark living room. "I don't know how to fix that." "Start by noticing it." That conversation did not save our marriage. Real life rarely turns because of one conversation. But after that, Jason began doing small things without announcing them. He set recurring pickup reminders. He made dinner on Tuesdays. He took Lily to swim class Saturday mornings so I could work on freelance projects. When Margaret criticized the childcare center, he changed the subject instead of asking me later whether she had a point. I noticed. I also noticed that part of his change came after my paycheck became real to him. That was harder to forgive. Respect given only after proof can look very similar to love if you are hungry enough for either one. In September, Margaret announced that she was planning a large first anniversary dinner for us. I did not want one. "It's 1 year," I told Jason. "Not 25. He gave a tired laugh. "Tell her that." Margaret had already reserved a private room at the Hartwell Grand, an upscale hotel in Buckhead. She wanted 40 guests, a plated dinner, flowers, printed menus, and a photographer. She talked about it at Sunday dinners with the seriousness of someone coordinating a diplomatic visit. I understood the real purpose immediately. The wedding had embarrassed her because my family had not looked impressive enough. The anniversary was her chance to revise the image. She wanted a room full of people who would see Jason as successful, me as polished, and the Caldwell family as prosperous. By then, my career made me useful to the picture. Margaret began introducing me differently. Claire is with Mercer Lane, she told a neighbor one afternoon. She works on national brands. The first time I heard it, I nearly turned around to see which Claire she meant. At another dinner, she told her sister, she's always been very creative. I encouraged her to get back into it. I looked across the table at Jason. He studied his wine. I could have corrected Margaret. I could have embarrassed her in front of everyone. Instead, I asked her sister whether she wanted more coffee. I was learning that not every lie deserved my energy. Then, 3 weeks before the anniversary dinner, the financial problem became impossible to hide. Jason's company announced a restructuring. His division would be cut by nearly 40%. He did not know whether he would keep his job. 2 days later, Margaret called him in a panic. Her late husband's flooring company had been sold years earlier, but much of her money was tied up in investments managed through a longtime family advisor. A commercial real estate fund she had put too much money into had stopped distributions. She was not broke, but the cash she expected to use for the anniversary dinner was suddenly unavailable, and she had already paid several non-refundable deposits. Jason told me while we were cleaning the kitchen. She wants to scale it down, he said. Good. She's embarrassed. I dried a plate. Also good. He gave me a warning look. I'm not enjoying her losing money, I said. I'm saying an anniversary dinner does not need 40 people and custom centerpieces. You know that's not how she sees it. I do. That's the problem. The following Sunday, Margaret sat at her dining table with a yellow legal pad, a calculator, and 3 pages of printed estimates from the hotel. For once, she was not performing confidence. Her reading glasses were low on her nose. She had crossed out the floral package twice and circled the wine service. We can reduce the guest list, she said. Maybe 28. No cousins from Birmingham. Megan asked, why not just cancel it? Margaret looked offended. Because invitations went out. People survive cancelled dinners. You don't understand. I almost said, we understand perfectly. Instead, I stayed quiet. Margaret turned to me. Claire, your parents wouldn't mind helping, would they? The room went still. I thought I had misheard her. Helping with what? Just temporarily. You said your father had a good harvest this year. If they could lend us a few thousand until the fund starts distributions again. Jason's chair scraped against the floor. Mom, no. Margaret frowned. I'm not asking for charity. I felt a calm settle over me so completely that it almost frightened me. This was the same woman who had packed scraps for my parents because she thought leftovers suited them. Now she was willing to reach toward their savings to protect her image. My parents won't be paying for this dinner, I said. Margaret's mouth tightened. I only suggested a loan. No. Claire, there's no need to be sensitive. Jason started to speak, but I raised a hand slightly. I did not need him to rescue me anymore. I'm not sensitive, I said. I'm clear. I reached into my bag and took out an envelope. I had prepared it the night before because I knew the conversation was coming. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000. I placed it on the table. Margaret stared at it. What's this? My contribution to the dinner. Jason looked at me sharply. Claire. The hotel balance is covered, I said. I spoke to the event manager yesterday. I also simplified the flowers and cancelled the photographer. We don't need staged pictures of an anniversary. If we want pictures, people have phones. Margaret lifted the check with both hands. $10,000? Yes. Where did you get this? I could not help it. I smiled. From work. She looked at Jason, as if he might explain that the money was actually his. He did not. I had been careful all year. My Mercer Lane salary went into our joint household account after retirement contributions, but my freelance work stayed separate. I had taken packaging, branding, and presentation projects selectively. One project led to another. I saved most of the income, set aside taxes, and built a financial cushion larger than anything I had ever controlled myself. $10,000 was still a lot of money to me. I did not hand it over casually. But I wanted the moment to mean something different than Margaret expected. I was not buying her respect. I was closing a door. She would never again be able to say my parents had to support me. She would never again be able to suggest that Jason had carried me. And after the dinner, I intended to make sure she never had the financial power to use generosity as a leash. "I don't understand," Margaret said. Megan leaned back in her chair and smiled into her water glass. "I think it's pretty easy to understand, Mom. Claire makes money." Margaret ignored her. "But with childcare and everything." "I budget," I said. Jason was still staring at me. "We should have talked about this," he said quietly. "About me paying for the dinner your mother insists on throwing for us?" "About $10,000. It's from my freelance account." His expression shifted. He had not known how much was in that account. That mattered too. I turned back to Margaret. "Use the check or don't. But don't ask my parents for money again." For perhaps the first time since I met her, Margaret had no response. The anniversary dinner happened on a Saturday night in October. The private room at the Hartwell Grand overlooked downtown Atlanta. The centerpieces were smaller than Margaret originally planned. The wine was less expensive. There was no photographer. No one seemed to care. My parents came in their best clothes. My father wore the same dark suit he had worn at the wedding, but this time he looked comfortable in it. My mother had bought a blue dress that made her eyes look bright. When Margaret greeted them, her voice had changed. "It's so good to see you both." My mother smiled politely. "You too, Margaret." That was all. She did not need revenge. Neither did I. Halfway through dinner, I received a call from a number I recognized immediately. Professor Daniel Whitmore had taught advanced identity design during my final year at Georgia. He was one of the first people who treated my instincts like skills instead of lucky accidents. After leaving the university, he built a design consultancy that worked with major institutions and national organizations. We had reconnected after he saw the Harbor and Pine packaging online. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Professor Whitmore?" "You can call me Daniel now. You've been out of school long enough." "I don't know if I can." "Then suffer through it. I have a question." His firm had been shortlisted for a national public health education campaign. The project required a large team, and he wanted me to join the core design group as an outside collaborator for the first phase. For a second, the hallway disappeared around me. "Are you asking me to work on the pitch?" "I'm asking whether you have capacity to work on the pitch. If we win, I'm asking whether Mercer Lane would release part of your time or let us contract through them." Naomi already knows I'm calling. Of course she did. I leaned against the wall. "Yes," I said. Then I corrected myself. "I mean, I need to review the schedule, but yes, I'm interested. Very interested." "Good. I'll send the brief Monday." "And Claire?" "Yes?" "Don't answer the way you did in my class. You don't need permission to have an opinion anymore." I laughed. "Naomi says the same thing." "Then listen to the women who hire you." When I returned to the table, Margaret was talking to Jason's uncle about the economy. I sat down beside my mother. "Everything okay?" she whispered. "More than okay." Before I could explain, Margaret asked, "Was that work?" "Yes." She waited. A year earlier, she would have asked whether I really needed to take a call during dinner. Now curiosity won. Anything important? I took a sip of water. A national campaign. They want me on the design team. Margaret's face changed. It was not joy exactly. It was recalculation. That's wonderful, she said, a little too loudly. Several relatives turned toward us. Claire has just been invited to work on a national campaign, Margaret announced. I looked at my mother. Her mouth twitched, because she saw what I saw. The woman who had once used a toast to tell a room I was beneath her was now using the same kind of room to advertise my success. The reversal should have felt triumphant. Instead it made me sad. Because now I knew exactly how conditional her approval was. After dinner, my father found me near the hotel lobby while Jason helped Margaret load leftover flowers into her car. You all right? He asked. Yeah. He glanced toward Margaret. She sure likes your job now. I laughed softly. Apparently. My father put both hands in his pockets. Remember that money we gave you before the wedding? I still remember. You did all this with that? It paid for childcare and software at the beginning. So, partly. He nodded slowly. Then it did what it was supposed to do. My throat tightened. Dad, I can pay you back. His expression became almost offended. That wasn't a loan. I know, but... Claire. I stopped. Money isn't only money, he said. Sometimes it's a door. Your mother and I just wanted you to have one you could open yourself. I looked through the glass doors at the city lights. I wish I'd understood sooner. You understood when you needed to. That was the closest my father ever came to giving speeches. The months after the anniversary were almost stranger than the months before it. Margaret became nice. Not warm. Not reflective. Nice. She stopped criticizing my clothes. She asked about work. She told relatives I was in demand. She offered to take Lily on days I had major presentations and no longer implied that needing childcare made me a bad mother. At Christmas, she gave me a leather portfolio case and said, "For your meetings." I thanked her. Then I went home and cried in the shower where no one could hear me. Jason found me later sitting on the edge of the bed. What's wrong? I laughed once, without humor. Your mom was nice to me. He looked confused. That's bad? No. That's the problem. He sat beside me. I turned the portfolio case in my hands. She could always have been like this. She knew how. She just didn't think I deserved it before. Jason said nothing. Do you understand how that feels? After a long moment, he nodded. I think I'm starting to. I looked at him. And you? He flinched. What about me? You changed too. Because I realized I was wrong. Partly. He looked down. I hated that I was hurting him. I hated even more that avoiding his discomfort was the old habit that had kept me silent. You started helping more when my job became real to you, I said. You defended me more when other people respected me. You listened to my opinions after clients paid for them. That's not fair. Maybe not completely. But it's not false. He stood and walked to the window. What do you want me to say? Nothing right now. I want you to think about it. He did. 2 days later, he told me he had scheduled a counseling appointment for himself through his company's employee assistance program. Not couples counseling? I asked. Maybe later. I think I need to figure out why I need my mother to approve of my life before I ask you to sit in a room and help me explain it. That answer was better than an apology. His company laid him off in January. The news came on a Thursday morning. He returned home at 11 carrying a cardboard box with a framed photo of Lily, 2 notebooks, a water bottle, and the plant I had given him when he got promoted. He set the box on the floor and stood in the kitchen without taking off his coat. "It happened," he said. I knew immediately. I walked over and hugged him. For the first time in months, he let his full weight rest against me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He held on for a long time. Losing the job stripped away something in him, but not in the way I feared. The first week, he was quiet and ashamed. The second, he started applying everywhere and tried to hide how often he checked his email. The third, he began doing school drop-off every morning because he was home anyway. One afternoon I came back from work and found him at the kitchen table with Lily, both of them covered in glitter from a preschool craft project. "Don't ask," he said. Lily shouted, "Daddy made a unicorn." He held up something that looked like a purple potato with a horn. I laughed so hard I had to put my bag down. For a few weeks, we felt almost like the couple we had been before resentment moved in. But healing did not erase memory. Jason received an offer in March from a smaller company with better leadership and slightly lower pay. He accepted it. He continued therapy. He cooked twice a week even after starting the new job. He stopped telling Margaret details about our finances. I believed his effort was real. I also realized real effort did not obligate me to return to the exact marriage we had before. By then, I had changed what I wanted from home. Our townhouse had always been in Jason's name because he bought it before we married. I had never cared. Now the fact bothered me, not because I wanted half of his property, but because I wanted something that could not be withdrawn from me if the atmosphere changed again. I started looking at houses quietly. Not mansions. Not anything that would impress Margaret. I looked at small townhouses and condos within a reasonable drive of Lily's preschool and my office. I wanted sunlight. A second bedroom for Lily. A corner for a real desk. A kitchen that did not have to be beautiful, just mine. When I told my financial advisor what I had saved, she raised her eyebrows. "You have a healthy down payment." I smiled. I'd been motivated. Between my salary, bonuses, freelance income, and disciplined saving, I had built more personal savings in 18 months than Jason had managed to keep during several years of higher earnings. His money had gone toward the townhouse, cars, dinners, and the expensive habits that came easily when he was trying to keep pace with his mother's idea of success. Mine had become an exit, then a choice. I found the place in May. It was a 3-bedroom townhouse in a quiet community near Decatur, with a small fenced patio and a row of crepe myrtles along the sidewalk. The kitchen cabinets were older than I liked. The upstairs carpet needed replacing. The third bedroom was barely large enough for a desk and bookcase. I loved it immediately. Lily ran to the smallest bedroom, stood in the middle, and announced, "This one is mine because it has a tree." A maple tree outside the window filled half the view. "Good reason," I said. I made an offer that afternoon. When it was accepted, I sat in my car and cried harder than I had after any promotion. Buying the house forced a conversation I had avoided with Jason. I told him after Lily went to bed. He listened without interrupting while I explained that the house would be in my name, purchased with my savings, and that I planned to move there with Lily at the end of June. His face went pale. "You're leaving me." "I'm leaving this house. Claire. I don't know what our marriage becomes next. I'm not filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm not trying to keep Lily from you. But I need a home that does not depend on whether you or your mother thinks I'm worth respecting." He stood up so quickly the chair leg scraped the floor. "My mother doesn't control this house. She did for a long time. Through you." He looked as if I had slapped him. "I've been trying." "I know. Then what am I supposed to do?" "Keep trying." He stared at me. I continued before I lost my nerve. Not to earn a prize. Not because if you do enough dishes I move back in. Keep trying because you don't want to be the man who told his wife she embarrassed him after she gave up her career for your family. Keep trying because Lily is watching how you treat women. Keep trying because you deserve to know who you are without your mother's approval. His eyes filled, but he looked away before the tears fell. Do you still love me? He asked. That was the hardest question anyone had asked me all year. Yes, I said. But love isn't the same thing as trust. And trust isn't the same thing as safety. I need time where I'm not depending on you while I figure out whether those can grow back. He sat down again. For a long time neither of us spoke. Finally he asked, "Can I help you move?" I almost said no. Then I nodded. Yes. Margaret took the news badly. She called me the next morning. Jason says you bought a house. A townhouse. Yes. Without him. In my name. Why would you do something so drastic when things are finally going well? I leaned against the counter in my office break room. Things are going better. That's not the same as everything being repaired. Marriage is difficult, Claire. You don't run away every time you're unhappy. A year earlier, that sentence would have made me defensive. Now it sounded almost simple. I'm not running. I bought a house. She inhaled sharply. What will people think? There it was. I closed my eyes. Margaret, I cannot build my life around what your dinner guests might think. I never said dinner guests. You didn't have to. She became quiet. Then, unexpectedly, she said, I was hard on you. I waited. The words seemed physically difficult for her. I thought Jason needed someone who understood our world. Your world? The way we live. Expectations. Presentation. I worried he would have to carry everything. I almost laughed at the irony, but her voice stopped me. For once, she sounded less like a villain and more like a frightened woman who had built an entire identity around never appearing vulnerable. You were afraid I'd be a burden, I said. Yes. So you treated me like one until I made enough money to prove otherwise. Silence. I suppose that's fair, she said finally. It was the closest thing to an admission I had ever heard from her. I don't need you to admire me, I said. I needed basic respect. Those are not the same thing. Her voice softened. Are you going to divorce my son? I don't know. He loves you. I know. He has changed. He's changing. Another silence. Will you still let me see Lily? That question surprised me most. Of course. As long as you respect the boundaries we set. I can do that. I did not tell her I would believe it after I saw it. Moving day came on the last Saturday in June, almost 2 years after my wedding and a little more than a year after the night I opened my laptop and made a list. My parents arrived before 8 with my father's pickup truck. Elena brought coffee and packing tape. Megan came with her husband and spent 20 minutes arguing with Jason about the correct way to carry a bookshelf downstairs. Jason did most of the heavy lifting without making the day about himself. Margaret arrived around noon carrying sandwiches. For several minutes she stood in the driveway of the townhouse looking at the boxes stacked near the garage. It's nice, she said. Thank you. Good schools nearby? Yes. She nodded, because practical questions were safer than emotional ones. Lily ran out the front door wearing a plastic construction hat one of the movers had given her. Grandma. Come see my tree. Margaret smiled despite herself and followed her upstairs. By late afternoon, the beds were assembled, the kitchen had enough boxes unpacked to make coffee, and my desk was standing in the small third bedroom. Not a used particle board desk in the corner of someone else's room. My desk. My office. My door. I stood there alone for a moment, resting my hand on the back of the chair. I thought of the first restaurant menu Elena sent me. The Harbor and Pine Project. Naomi telling me I was prepared, not lucky. Professor Whitmore calling during the anniversary dinner. My father handing me that envelope outside a cheap hotel and telling me to keep it. Downstairs, I heard Margaret laughing at something Lily said. I heard Jason ask where I wanted a box of books. My life was not tidy. My marriage was not resolved. Success had not erased pain or turned difficult people into saints. But I had choices. That was what I had been building all along. Near sunset, everyone began to leave. My parents hugged me twice. Elena made me promise to send a photo once the office was set up. Megan whispered, "I'm proud of you," then pretended to inspect the porch lights so neither of us had to get emotional. Jason stood beside his car longer than necessary. "Lily's bag is packed for Tuesday," I said. "Her pajamas are in the front pocket." He nodded. We had agreed she would stay with him 2 nights that week while we adjusted to the new routine. Okay. And she needs the library book back Wednesday. I put it in my calendar. That made both of us smile. He looked at the townhouse. It really is nice. I know. You did good, Claire. A year earlier, I might have needed those words from him. Now I could simply receive them. Thank you. He stepped forward and hugged me. I hugged him back. There was love in it. There was grief too. And something neither of us could name yet, maybe the beginning of a different relationship, maybe the end of the old one. For once, I did not force myself to know. Margaret was the last to leave. She stood near the front door with her purse on her arm, looking around the living room. "When are you coming back for dinner?" she asked. I could make Sunday roast next week. The old version of me would have heard the question as an obligation. I heard it as an invitation I was allowed to accept or decline. "Not next Sunday," I said. "We need a quiet weekend. But we'll come by soon." Margaret nodded. Then she surprised me by reaching for my hand. "All right." I squeezed her fingers once and let go. After she drove away, I closed the door and turned the lock. Lily was upstairs singing to herself while arranging stuffed animals on her bed. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere beyond the patio fence. Nothing about the moment was grand. There was no audience. No champagne toast. No expensive room full of people waiting to see who had won. I walked upstairs and found Lily standing at her window. "Mommy, look. My tree is moving." A summer breeze stirred the maple leaves outside. I sat beside her on the floor. "It is." She leaned against me. "Are we staying here?" "Yes, sweetheart. This is home." She accepted that answer without needing to know how much it had cost me to say it. Later that night, after she was asleep, I unpacked one final box in my office. At the bottom was an old folder from college. Inside were sketches, class critiques, and the first business card I had ever printed for myself. Tucked between 2 sheets of paper was a copy of the deposit slip from the $5,000 my parents gave me before the wedding. I sat on the floor with it in my hand. For a long time I had thought dignity meant convincing people not to look down on me. I had been wrong. Dignity was not their opinion changing when my salary changed. It was not Margaret praising me to relatives. It was not Jason finally recognizing that my work mattered. It was not the hotel dinner, the national campaign, or the check I could afford to place on a table. Dignity was the moment I stopped negotiating against myself. It was paying for childcare before I knew whether a client would call. It was sending the email after years away from the industry. It was saying no when Margaret reached for my parents' money. It was telling Jason that love did not erase disrespect. It was buying a home before I knew exactly what my marriage would become. My parents had been poor by Margaret's standards. They had never had the kind of money that impressed her. But they had given me something far more useful than the appearance of status. They had taught me that work could be quiet, that sacrifice did not need an audience, and that help was supposed to make a person stronger, not indebted. I thought of the wedding again, of my father's lowered eyes when Margaret made her joke. For a long time I had wanted to go back to that room and defend him. Now I understood I had done something better. I had built a life in which his worth never needed Margaret's approval. Neither did mine. I placed the old deposit slip in the top drawer of my new desk. Then I turned off the light, closed the office door, and walked down the hall to check on my daughter. Outside her window, the leaves kept moving in the dark. For the first time in years, nothing in me was waiting for someone else to decide whether I belonged.